I never expected her to remember my name, let alone everything else. It was past 10 on a Tuesday, and the small cafe on the corner smelled like burnt sugar and old books. I was in my usual spot near the window, the one with the cracked leather booth, trying to keep my laptop open for an assignment I wasn't actually doing. My fingers hovered over the keys, but mostly I watched the rain smear the streetlights outside. That's when she came in. My friend's mom, Jenna, mid-40s, the kind of woman who moved like she wasn't trying to move at all, but somehow everything around her shifted when she did. She carried a tote bag that looked heavier than her shoulders wanted it to be, and her coat was damp at the collar. "Hey," she said, like it was a greeting I should have expected, but didn't. Hi." I managed, trying not to stare at the way her hair caught the light, a faint gold halo in the dim cafe. I looked down immediately at my laptop screen, though I wasn't reading anything. She smiled, just a little, and ordered the same thing she always did: black tea, no sugar, double steeped. I remembered because I'd noticed last week when she almost dropped a tea bag in her lap and cursed softly. She nodded at me, the kind of nod that suggested she remembered not just me, but that moment too. I folded my hands on the table, a little awkwardly, trying to act like I belonged here. I didn't. Not really. The cafe was small, but I could feel the space between us stretching like it had its own weight. She slid into the booth across from me before I could invite her, like she'd decided she was allowed. I didn't argue. "You're quiet tonight," she said, stirring her tea slowly. She didn't need to say much more. Her gaze was enough to make my words stick in my throat. "Yeah," I said, and it sounded flat even to me. "Just thinking." She smiled again, not teasing, just soft, like she knew I was overthinking something tiny, probably stupid. I wanted to say something witty back, but my throat went dry. I flicked my eyes toward her hands as she lifted the cup, noticed the little tremor in her fingers, the way her wedding ring caught the light. The conversation drifted into small things: weather, my friend, the coffee roast, but every sentence felt loaded with an unsaid weight. I noticed the way she laughed quietly at my half-joke, the brief pause before she answered my questions, as if weighing the words in a way no one ever had with me. I pulled out my phone to check a text I hadn't sent, paused, and put away again. A habit. I never really sent them, the words too much and too little at the same time. She leaned back, stretched her arms over the table just slightly, and the leather creaked. I noticed because it sounded like it was happening only for me, and it made my chest tighten. "You should come by sometime," she said suddenly. Not a question, just a statement. I looked at her, tried to read her face, trying to guess if this was casual or something else entirely. She didn't add anything, just sipped her tea, her eyes flicking up to mine for the briefest second. I nodded, uncertain, my fingers tracing the edge of the booth. And then she left. No fanfare, no dramati gudvie. Just the quiet slide of her coat against the doorframe, the soft click of her heels on wet pavement. I stared after her, the teacup cold now in my hand, my stomach tight in a way I couldn't name. When I finally looked at my phone, there was a message waiting. Her name, just 2 words on the screen. "See you soon." I hadn't expected that. I didn't text back immediately. I sat at my desk, fingers hovering over the keyboard like they were too aware of their own clumsiness. The rain outside had stopped, but the damp smell lingered in the air, the kind that made you notice small things, like the way the light bounced off the corner of a bookshelf, or the crease in a napkin I hadn't folded properly. By the time I walked back to the cafe a few days later, she was already there, stirring her tea with that same deliberate slowness. She smiled when she saw me, the kind of smile that made me want to apologize for not knowing how to sit properly in the world. "You made it," she said. "Yeah," I mumbled, sliding into the seat across from her. My jacket still smelled faintly of rain. We ordered nothing new, 2 teas, the same way she liked hers. The silence between us felt less like emptiness this time, more like something fragile, like a glass ornament waiting for too much weight. "Do you ever," she started, her voice trailing off as she tapped her spoon against the cup, "feel like you're just passing through other people's lives?" I didn't answer right away. I didn't want to break the pause. "Like nothing really sticks," she continued, eyes distant. "Even when you think it does." I nodded slowly, though my chest ached. I knew exactly what she meant. I had my own half-written thoughts on loneliness, unsent texts, paused thoughts, imagined conversations, but somehow hearing her say it out loud made it sharper. I, I left a job last year. I finally admitted, voice low, not because I hated it, just felt stuck. Like I wasn't supposed to be there, you know? She glanced at me, her gaze softening. I know that feeling, she said. Her hand hovered over her tea. Then she set it down as if that small motion could anchor her in the present. There was a moment when I imagined what it would be like if nothing else existed. No age gap, no boundaries, no my friend waiting somewhere, no divorce papers still on her desk at home. The thought made my chest tighten, and I looked down at my hands, pretending to rearrange sugar packets. You've got quiet hands, she said suddenly, a hint of smile. Always doing something small without thinking about it. I blinked at her, unsure if she meant it as a compliment or an observation. I wanted to tell her she noticed too much, that she saw things I didn't even realize about myself. We sat in silence for a while after that, watching the rain streaks on the window from last week. I poured a little tea into her cup when she looked away, and our fingers brushed. It lasted a heartbeat, maybe two, but enough to make me aware of everything I wanted to say and couldn't. She looked at me then, eyes steady and soft, and said, almost casually, you know, sometimes I wonder if the people we notice are the ones who notice us back. Even quietly. I didn't answer, because nothing I could say would capture the sudden weight of that glance. I just held it, a touch of warmth passing between us over nothing and everything at once. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. I didn't mean to stay as long as I did. She had that way of filling the space without even trying, and suddenly I was aware of every scrape of her chair, the little inhale she took when the tea was just the right temperature. I should go, I said, suddenly noticing my backpack on the floor. She didn't look up, just stirred her tea again, slow enough that I wanted to reach across and stop her. Sure, she murmured, but not like she meant it. I paused at the edge of the table, my hand brushing the corner, and caught the faint scent of her shampoo. Something in the room shifted, like we were both aware of what we weren't saying. I wanted to ask if she noticed it too. My hesitation, the way my chest thumped when our knees nearly touched under the table. But I didn't. I left the words unsaid. Just then, the door swung open, and her son, my friend, walked in. A grin, oblivious, waving at her. I froze mid-step. Hey, Mom, he called, bouncing toward the counter. I stepped back, pretending to tie my shoelace. Jenna's shoulders tensed, her hand hovering over her tea again, a subtle shake in her fingers. She smiled at him, but it was sharper, quick, a mask I could almost see through. I watched her laugh at something he said, the sound too bright for the tension that still clung in the air. I realized how dangerous this quiet attraction had become. Even a glance could complicate things. A smile, a pause, a sip of tea, they all carried weight now. Once he was distracted with his phone, she leaned slightly toward me, just a little, enough that I noticed the shift, the closeness, the almost imperceptible warmth of her arm brushing mine as she reached for the sugar. Are you busy this weekend? She asked casually. But her eyes weren't casual. They held something I couldn't name. I wanted to answer in the affirmative, to stay, to cross that invisible line. But my voice stuck somewhere between thought and breath. I nodded instead. Small gesture, almost meaningless. But we both knew it wasn't. Then, she laughed softly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, leaning in a fraction too close. My stomach knotted. My lips wanted to form the words, to ask something I shouldn't. I wanted to tell her maybe I'd been thinking about her every night, the way I pictured her hands resting on the table, the way her quiet gaze followed me when I thought she wasn't looking. But I didn't. Instead, our eyes locked, just for a second, long enough that the hum of the cafe, the clinking cups, and the muted conversations around us all disappeared. I could see the unspoken, the almost the could be. Her lips parted slightly. Not a word, just a breath. I leaned in without thinking, the impulse of the moment pure and sudden. She hesitated just a fraction, and I stopped. A heartbeat. Then she pulled back, her hand brushing the table between us like it was a line neither of us was meant to cross. The air felt charged. and suddenly ordinary became unbearable. I left soon after, my backpack slung carelessly over one shoulder, my mind replaying the moment 1,000 times. That near kiss, that half-confession, the thing we almost gave ourselves and didn't. And yet, I couldn't stop wondering if she wanted me to. I noticed it first on a Thursday. Her usual booth was empty when I walked in. No smile, no nod, no carefully steeped tea waiting. The air smelled the same, coffee and rain, but something was missing, like the room itself had been hollowed out. I waited, thinking maybe she'd be late. 10 minutes. 15. I stirred my tea too slowly, tracing the rim with my finger, pretending I wasn't counting seconds. When she finally appeared, she didn't look at me. She ordered quickly, almost clipped, her eyes flicking past mine to the window outside. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck in my throat. You okay?" I asked. She shrugged. "Yeah, busy week." Busy. Not the same as before. The warmth, the pauses, the small glances gone. She sat across from me, and for the first time, I noticed the distance between us. It wasn't just the table. It was everything else, everything unspoken. Over the next few days, it got worse. Messages I thought I'd send stayed unsent. Calls I considered never dialed. I imagined reasons. Maybe she was tired. Maybe she'd realized the risk of this, whatever it was. And then I heard from my friend, almost in passing. She'd run into her ex last week. Not at the grocery, not in passing, but really run into him. Talking, smiling. Too easily. My chest tightened, but I couldn't ask her directly. I couldn't. I started showing up less too, pacing the space between wanting to see her and fearing what I might find. Every time I passed the cafe, I imagined her hands wrapped around a cup, but the sight never came. The empty seat at her table became heavier than the world outside. I thought about calling, just to break the quiet, but I couldn't. The phone felt heavier than my own hand. My mind spun stories I didn't want to believe, stories where she'd moved on, stories where the almost between us had never existed outside my own imagination. I kept replaying our last walk, the question she left lingering. Are we going too far? I wanted to answer, wanted to tell her yes, but life had stopped me before I could. Now, every silent text, every unanswered knock at the door, made the pause feel infinite. I imagined her smiling at someone else, or maybe just pretending nothing happened. My chest ached, not for loss exactly, but for the space she used to fill. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. One evening, I sat by the window, staring at the empty booth. The tea had gone cold hours ago. My phone sat next to me, the screen dark, the words I might have sent lingering unsent. I'm here. When you're ready. I left it there. The cafe emptied around me. Chairs scraped the floor. The rain returned, soft and quiet, but she didn't. The booth remained vacant. I traced the edge with my finger again, hoping the world would give me a clue, a sign, a reason to move. But there was nothing. She opened the door before I could knock properly. My hand froze on the frame. She wasn't smiling, not exactly, but she wasn't closing the door either. Just that small hesitation, the fraction of a second that made me realize everything depended on it. Can I come in?" I said, voice low. She nodded, stepping aside. The apartment smelled faintly of tea and the faint musk of her coat. Everything was the same, and yet different, smaller, more fragile, somehow real. We sat at the kitchen table. No words at first. Just the scrape of a chair, the hum of the fridge, the quiet tick of the clock. My hands rested on the table, idle, except for the occasional tap against the coffee mug. Her fingers lingered near the edge, close enough to brush mine if I wanted, but I didn't. Not yet. I didn't know how to ask. I said finally, almost to myself. Or if I even should. She nodded. I wasn't sure I wanted to hear it either. Her voice was low, calm, but the slight shake betrayed her. I leaned forward. Not close enough to touch. Not yet, just enough that the space between us felt smaller than the years, the mistakes, the boundaries. I've been thinking about it, I admitted. All of it. You, me, the whatever this is. She swallowed, looked down at her hands. I've thought too, she whispered. More than I should. And I keep asking myself, do I stay? Or do I step back? We both knew the cost. Not just us, not just feelings. My friend, her life, the quiet ethics of our days. But the pull, the small gravity between us, was something neither reason nor guilt could erase. I exhaled slowly. I'm scared, I said, of messing it up, of losing it before it even started. She looked up then, eyes steady, calm, sad but honest. Me too. And that was it. Nothing dramatic, no grand declarations. Just the two of us, two people sitting close enough that our breaths could collide, deciding, silently, that risk was worth the truth. She reached over, a small, careful gesture. Fingers brushing my hand. I didn't pull away. Didn't move forward either. Just let it rest there. The weight of everything unsaid and the quiet decision to let the connection exist for one small moment. We didn't need words after that. A soft smile, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. A nod. Okay, that was enough. The kitchen clock ticked on. Outside, the city carried on. But in that small space, the tension had folded in on itself, leaving only a fragile kind of peace. I realized, finally, that some choices didn't need fanfare to be monumental. Some confessions didn't need speeches. Some connections were defined not by words, but by the quiet acceptance of being seen. And in that calm, measured pause, I let myself breathe. Okay, the cafe smelled the same as it had when I first noticed her. Burnt sugar, faint dampness, old wood. I slid into our usual booth, the one near the window, and she was already there, black coffee in hand, the steam curling lazily in the morning light. Morning, she said, just like she always did. No fanfare, no heavy pause. Just a small ritual we'd both grown into. Morning, I replied, a smile tugging at the corner of my lips. My fingers found the edge of the table, tapping once, twice, habit from years ago, but now it felt ordinary, comfortable, not awkward. We didn't need to catch up on everything. Life had its own rhythm. Work, errands, small inconveniences. But she laughed quietly at my half-baked jokes. I noticed her hands, steady now, no tremor in the cup she held. We shared tea, we shared silence, we shared glances that spoke without speaking. The riverbank walk came again, though the rain hadn't. She leaned on the low bench, her coat draped over one arm, and I sat beside her. I picked at a sugar packet, flipping it carefully between my fingers. Small things, tiny routines. Somehow, they mattered more than grand declarations ever could. I realized how much I'd learned to see her. Not as the forbidden, the risky, the impossible, but as someone who fit into the quiet corners of my life like she'd always belonged there. And she saw me in all my hesitant gestures, all my awkward silences, and chose to stay. A half hour passed. The sun climbed higher. The streets outside buzzed, mundane and ordinary. And still, in our booth, time seemed to pause just slightly. Not dramatically at all, just enough for us to exist together quietly. She looked at me, the faintest smile tugging at her lips. Coffee. Black, I said, and she nodded. My favorite. She poured it without asking. It hit me then. That's what love had become for us. Not grand, not shouted from rooftops, not desperate. Just knowing each other's habits, noticing the small gestures, laughing quietly at inside jokes no one else would understand. I sipped my coffee, felt the warmth spread through me, and thought, okay, everything okay. And I knew she felt it too, because in the corner of her eye, the way she adjusted the handle of her mug, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, those tiny, unremarkable moments were ours. Only we would understand.